Dr. Albert Wesker, ever the calculating visionary, had recently come face to face with the frail but formidable Oswald Spencer, Earl Spencer, the enigmatic founder of Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. In a rare moment of candor, Spencer peeled back the curtain on his ultimate ambition, a clandestine eugenics program designed to forge a new breed of humanity, a race of Ubermensch who would usher in a higher form of civilization. To Wesker's astonishment, he was not merely an ally to his vision, he was a product of it. But Wesker's own conclusions took a darker, more radical turn. Disillusioned by the chaos of the so-called war and terror, he began to view the conflict not as a geopolitical failure, but as a symptom of a deeper flaw, humanity itself. In his eyes, the species had outlived its purpose, its potential strangled by weakness and moral stagnation. There could be no salvation through diplomacy or reform. The world needed purging, and so Wesker turned to the progenitor virus, an ancient volatile compound with the power to remake life at the genetic level. His plan was nothing short of apocalyptic, to unleash Uroboros across the globe, an unstoppable force that would extinguish all but those who carried the rare genetic markers for survival. Those chosen few would not only endure, they would evolve, transformed into beings of superior strength, intellect, and purpose. From the ashes of the old world, a new one would rise, shaped in his image, a utopia born from annihilation. The first real setback came deep within the forgotten ruins of the Endopia kingdom. Hidden beneath its decaying temples and ancient stonework, Tricell, Wesker's chosen partner, had established a new research facility. It was here, among the bones of a lost civilization, that the progenitor virus once again showed its merciless selectivity. Despite their efforts, the number of humans genetically capable of surviving and mutating under its influence remained frustratingly low. Far too few to realize Wesker's vision of a world reborn. But he had a contingency. From a former STARS operative turned lab subject, Jill Valentine, Wesker had extracted antibodies developed in response to her prior exposure to the T-virus. These antibodies became his tool of evolution. Time and time again he injected them into his Uroboros cultures, watching the results from clinical detachment. Each failed strain brought him closer to success. Eventually, through forced natural selection, the virus adapted, becoming something new. It was no longer as wildly lethal as progenitor, but it was controllable, stable enough to proceed to the next phase. And so, testing escalated. Over the next 2 years, thousands of human subjects were exposed to the evolving strain. With Tricell's backing and researchers like Miguel at his side, the Uroboros project grew rapidly. By May of 2008, the virus had reached what Wesker deemed perfection. Samples were secured in warheads, sleek, silent messengers of global transformation. The plan was in motion: release the virus into Earth's upper atmosphere and let it descend upon the world like a second Genesis. But the project's ambitions exceeded its control. An unexpected fire during containment preparations triggered a secondary mutation. From the smoldering wreckage emerged something grotesque, an anthropod, an abomination later classified as the Reaper. It was an unplanned byproduct of Uroboros, and a daily reminder that evolution rarely follows a clean path. By March 2009, the final operation had begun. The countdown to humanity's reckoning had started. But Wesker's vision met its end not with a bang, but with resistance. The Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance intervened, striking at the heart of the operation. In the chaos, at least 4 individuals were infected to Uroboros. 3 of them, ordinary humans, were torn apart by the virus, their bodies twisting into grotesque shapes before imploding in violent failure. One even consumed other corpses in a desperate, mindless frenzy. Only one man endured: Wesker. His genetics had always been different, chosen, superior. Uroboros didn't kill him, it transformed him. A perfect fusion of virus and will. For a moment, he stood as the culmination of the project, but even gods can fall, and in the end, so did he. Alex Wesker, his elusive and calculating counterpart, had not abandoned a dream of transcendence. Sometime after Albert's fall, she succeeded in securing a sample of the Uroboros virus. Where others saw disaster, she saw opportunity. Her path led her to the remote and isolated Shan Island, a barren fortress carved from stone and silence, far from the prying eyes of the world. There her true work began. The island soon became a crucible for new bioweapons research, with the T-Phobos virus nearing its final stages, a strain designed to activate violently in the presence of fear. Alex shifted her attention to Uroboros, eager to see what could be forged in the fires of viral synthesis. She found her answer in the dead. The island was already littered with the remnants of the failed T-Phobos experiments, bodies twisted by terror and left to rot in their glass cells. But Alex, ever the pragmatist, saw potential in failure. Into the discarded corpses she injected the black strains of Uroboros. The results were grotesque and promising. From those corpses rose creatures that defied anatomy. Stitched together with an unnatural resilience, their bodies held upright by crude surgical staples and sheer viral aggression. She called them revenants. They were violent, unrelenting, and mindlessly loyal. Perfect weapons born from two viral nightmares. And they were also only the beginning. Alice Wesker had inherited more than her brother's research. She had inherited his ambition. But her vision was not merely about evolution. It was about immortality. By 2011, Alex Wesker's plans had grown more intricate and more ruthless. On the surface, she extended a hand of cooperation to Neil Fisher, a high-ranking figure within TerraSave. His organization was committed to humanitarian aid and biohazard prevention. But Neil, disillusioned and bitter, had begun to see such ideals as naive illusions. He believed in the darker truth, that survival demanded sacrifice, and so in secret, he conspired with Alex. Their agreement was simple. In exchange for the Uroboros samples, Neil would supply her with the new T-Phobos test subjects, first candidates to be broken and remade by fear. Alex had no shortage of dead flesh, but she needed minds to push, to shatter. Fisher, blinded by his own ambitions, delivered. But Alex Wesker had no intention of sharing power. She watched him closely, studied the cracks forming in his conscience, the guilt he buried beneath cold pragmatism. His betrayal of TerraSave, of friends like Claire Redfield, was useful, but temporary. When the time came to finalize their deal, he didn't receive a vial of Uroboros. He received an injection. The virus surged through his bloodstream like liquid fire, seizing his cells in its monstrous grip. She called it punishment, not just for his betrayal of those who he trusted, but for the arrogance of thinking he was her equal. Neil Fisher screamed as his body convulsed, his form reshaping into something inhuman. What remained was no longer a man, but a brute fueled by rage and agony, a mindless beast twisted by Uroboros. To Alex, he had become just another experiment, a warning, and a reminder that in her world of calculated evolution, loyalty was as disposable as flesh. When Alex Wesker finally underwent her own transformation, an agonizing fusion of Uroboros and the fear-triggered T-Phobos, she became something less than human and far more than monstrous. But madness brought with it a cruel clarity. No longer bound by the limitations of morality or restraint, Alex enacted the final act of her island experiment. Deep beneath the fortress of Shen Island, she unlocked the containment protocols and released her creations, the revenants, into the wild. They surged from laboratories like a plague of stitched nightmares, dragging their rusted surgical implants and snarling through half-formed jaws. In her eyes, they were her children, reanimated, refined tools of chaos. She watched as they fanned out across the crumbling settlements, the abandoned villages, and the dense island forests. Over the next 6 months, the revenants devoured everything. They consumed the corpses of the fallen and hunted the living. When no human prey remained, they turned on the island's wildlife. Bears, birds, even insects. Nothing was spared. The ecosystem collapsed under the weight of their hunger, and the island withered into a graveyard of silence and blood. But monsters draw attention. Eventually, the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance responded. A small strike force was dispatched under a veil of secrecy. The mission: containment and eradication. What they found was a landscape of ruin, and the last remnants of Wesker's legacy roaming it like broken gods. The revenants did not die easily. But in time, fire and lead prevailed where science had failed. The revenants were wiped out, every last one burned, shot, or buried beneath the rubble of Alex's fallen empire. The island was declared uninhabitable, classified, forgotten, and yet whispers remained of Alex, of Uroboros, of something still breathing in the dark. The nightmare in Shenlan reached its breaking point when the survivors buried Burton and his estranged daughter, Moira, and the battle-hardened Claire Redfield finally confronted the architect of the horror, Alex Wesker. Twisted by her own hubris and the unstable fusion of Uroboros and T-Phobos, Alex had become something truly abominable. Her body was a patchwork of warped muscles and glistening black snoo. Her form barely human, her mind fractured beyond recognition. She had lost control, and not purpose. She was still clinging to the idea of transcendence, even as her body failed her. Burying fought with everything they had. The creature that had once been Alex proved unstoppable, faster than her size suggested, vicious beyond logic, and strengthened by her blind desperation to survive. Moira, long thought broken by fear, found her resolve in the heat of battle, standing beside her father and claiming her strength. But Alex wasn't finished. The virus surged through her like wildfire, exploding her body outward into a grotesque giant of withering tendrils and reinforced flesh. She grew monstrous, colossal in stature, her pulsating heart exposed to her torn chest plating, beating like a war drum. It seemed she might outlast them all, until Claire found her opening. Amid the smoke, screams, and crumbling rubble, she steadied her aim. One shot, one chance. The RPG launched from her shoulder, with a deafening roar streaking across the battlefield like a bolt of vengeance. The warhead plunged into Alex's exposed heart, detonating in a blinding explosion of fire and gore. The monstrosity let out one last earth-shaking scream. Rage, pain, and disbelief mingled into a dying wail before her body collapsed into a burning heap, sizzling and twitching as the last traces of her life were consumed. Silence followed. The reign of Alex Wesker had ended, not with a calculated whisper, but with a roar of defiance from the very people she had once deemed inferior. Her experiments were ash, her island ruined, and her dream of godhood destroyed by those she failed to break. With Alex Wesker dead, the island fell into stillness. The laboratories, once alive with twisted silence and cries of the damned, were now buried under rubble and ash. The screams of the revenants had faded into memory. The fog that clung to the island for so long, physical and psychological, began to lift. Barry Burton held his daughter close, no longer fearing she would slip away from him again. Moira, once shackled by fear, stood tall in the aftermath, having proven to herself and to her father that she was stronger than the darkness Alex had tried to bury her in. Files were burned in deep black archives, and what the world didn't know was deemed safer that way. To the public, Alex Wesker was just another mad woman lost to tragedy on another uncharted rock in the sea. But the virus never sleeps. Somewhere, samples remain, hidden, forgotten, waiting. Uroboros, T-Phobos, the Revenants, creations born from obsession and fear, may have been contained, but their echoes linger in DNA of the world. In dark places, men still dream of godhood. In the shadows, evolution watches and waits.